The sky had been growing darker by the minute, clouds heavy with the promise of rain. The street was slick with the sheen of wet pavement, reflecting the faint lights of the distant city. But there was no warmth in the atmosphere. A wind swept down the narrow avenue, sending chills through the blonde woman standing alone on the sidewalk. She clutched her coat tighter around her fragile frame, her boots sinking slightly into the soaked ground. The downpour hadn't come yet, but she could feel it like the air before a storm, thick and heavy with anticipation. She had been waiting for what felt like hours. Her fingers trembled as she checked the time again. No sign of him. He had promised, hadn't he? He'd promised that he would come, but promises could be fragile things, especially when they were made in the world of the wealthy. A world where time and people were nothing but commodities to be bought and sold. Yet she held on to the hope that he would keep his word, that today's. Her eyes scanned the street for any sign of a vehicle, her heart thudding in her chest with the rhythm of uncertainty. The cold seemed to seep deeper into her bones, and she shook, not just from the chill, but from something much heavier, something that felt like the weight of the world. She had been here, alone, for too long. It was almost as if she was invisible. To the world around her, just another forgotten soul in a city that never seemed to stop moving. The cars passed by in a blur, their headlights slicing through the rain. The air smelled of wet asphalt, the metallic scent of water and iron filling her nostrils as she waited. There was no shelter here, no warmth. Only the streetlights and the endless hum of the city, her only company. She had grown accustomed to waiting. It had been her life for as long as she could remember, waiting for someone to notice her. Waiting for a chance, waiting for a future that never seemed to come. But this was different. This wasn't just any man she was waiting for. This was him. The man who had promised to take her away from the loneliness, to pull her from the shadows and into a world of light. He had told her that today would be different, that he would come for her. But as the minutes dragged on, her hope began to falter. Another gust of wind whipped her hair into her face, and she brushed it aside, her eyes scanning the darkened street once more. There was no sign of him. Maybe he had forgotten. Maybe he was too busy, too important. Maybe she was nothing more than a passing thought to him, an afterthought in the grand scheme of his life. The sound of tires against wet pavement grew louder, and she turned, half expecting to see his black limousine pull up beside her. But it wasn't him, just another car, a faceless stranger rushing through the rain. Her heart sank, the weight of disappointment pressing against her chest like a heavy stone. She had no umbrella, no protection against the deluge that was now pouring from the sky. And yet, there she stood, waiting in the rain, hoping that somehow, some way, he would find her. Her hair clung to her face, damp strands sticking to her cheeks, but she didn't care. She just wanted to feel seen, wanted to know that, for once, someone cared enough to show up. Minutes stretched into hours. The streets began to empty as the rain grew heavier, but still, she waited. The chill of the night began to settle deeper into her bones, and the sound of raindrops became the only thing she could hear, their rhythmic tapping on the pavement like the beat of her own lonely heart. Just as she thought she couldn't bear it any longer, the headlights of a car finally appeared through the mist of rain. She blinked through the downpour, squinting, her breath catching in her throat. Could it be him? The car moved closer, its tires hissing against the wet road. As it slowed, she could barely make out the shape of the vehicle, but there was something about it, something that made her heart race in anticipation. And then, just as the car came to a stop beside her, she saw it. The sleek black limousine, its windows tinted, gleamed in the rain-soaked night. It was him. Her heart skipped a beat as the door opened, but she didn't move. She stood frozen, the rain now cascading down around her, soaking her through to the bone. Was this real, or had she been dreaming all along? The storm around her seemed to pause for just a moment, the world standing still, as if holding its breath. And then she heard the soft click of the door opening fully, the sound of his presence as he stepped out. A figure in a tailored suit, tall, confident, and poised. She could feel his gaze even before he spoke. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel invisible anymore. The rain was relentless now, the downpour a constant symphony of water pounding against the earth. It should have been a cold, miserable night, but when he stepped out of the limousine, the world seemed to change. There was something about him, a presence that cut through the storm, a warmth that reached her despite the chill. His tailored suit gleamed even in the dim light, his face obscured for just a moment by the hood of his coat, but his posture was unmistakable. He was here. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times before, every detail played out in her mind. Yet now, with him standing before her, it was nothing like she had expected. His gaze met hers across the dark street, piercing through the rain. The world around her, the city, the noise, the cold, all of it faded. All that was left was him and her standing in the storm. The distance between them only a few steps. She couldn't move. Her body was frozen, her heart pounding in her chest like it wanted to break free. She felt a rush of emotions: relief, disbelief, hope. Hope and, yet deep down, a nagging uncertainty. Was this really happening? Would he truly come for her? Or was this just another fleeting moment, a fleeting glimpse of a dream that would soon slip away? He didn't speak, not yet. Instead, he took a step forward, his footsteps firm and deliberate in the puddled streets. The sound of his shoes against the wet pavement was the only thing she could hear, a sharp contrast to the rain falling all around them. She stood there, trembling not from the cold, but from the raw intensity of the moment. The wind picked up, again whipping her hair around her face, but she didn't care. She wanted to memorize this moment, every detail. The way the rain caught in his hair, the way his eyes never left hers, as if he was waiting for something, some signal from her. But she didn't know what to do, how to respond. She had spent so long waiting, so long hoping, that now that he was here, she didn't know how to bridge the gap between her dreams and reality. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy with meaning, like something important was about to happen. He moved closer, each step bringing him closer to her. His coat was soaked, but it didn't seem to matter. He was focused solely on her, and that attention felt like a rare gift. When he finally reached her, he paused for just a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her heart flutter. Then, as if in some silent agreement, he extended his hand towards her. She hesitated. Was it real? Was he really offering her this moment, this chance? Slowly she reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed against his. The contact like a spark, igniting something deep within her. She had waited so long for this, for someone to see her, to pull her from the loneliness and into a life that felt meaningful. And in that moment, standing in the rain with him, she realized that she wasn't alone anymore. He was here, just as he had promised. There was no need for words, no need for grand gestures. The connection between them was enough. He didn't rush her. Instead, he let his hand linger, offering her the choice, the space to decide what to do next. His eyes softened, the tension of the moment giving way to something else, something like understanding, something like trust. The rain fell harder, but the storm around them seemed to lose its power. She looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. There was no longer any need to wait. The moment was here. It was real. And as he pulled her gently into the warmth of the limousine, the world outside seemed to disappear entirely. All that was left was the two of them, together, as the car pulled away into the night. The inside of the limousine was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The sound of the rain pounding against the windows was muffled, like the world beyond was fading away. The soft leather seats embraced her, and for the first time that night, she allowed herself to relax. She glanced over at him as the car began its journey through the rain-soaked streets, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the lights inside the car. He was sitting next to her, but the space between them felt vast, like an ocean of untold words and unspoken truths. Her heart still raced, the events unfolding like a dream that she couldn't quite grasp. She wasn't sure how long she had been waiting, how long she had been standing in the storm, or how long she had been holding on to the idea that this moment could ever truly come to life. But here she was, in the back of a sleek, black limousine, with the man who had promised to change her life. And now that he was here, she wasn't sure what to say. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The car glided through the streets, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional swish of tires against the wet road. She looked out the window, watching the city pass by, its lights reflected in the puddles, blurring as they drove further from the street where she had stood alone. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, spinning faster than the car itself. Was he thinking, Did he see her the way she saw him? Was this some kind of grand gesture, or was it simply another chapter in a life she didn't belong to? He was a man of power, of wealth, of status, and she was just someone who had hoped for a chance. She turned her head slightly, her gaze meeting his for the first time since they had gotten in the car. He was looking out the window, his jaw clenched, his expression unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of emotion that made her heart tighten. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly, his voice a low murmur that cut through the silence between them. "I know what you're thinking." She blinked, surprised by the depth of his words, the way he seemed to read her so easily, despite the distance between them. She wasn't used to people understanding her like this, to being seen in a way that felt more real than anything she had experienced. Her life, until now, had been a series of moments where she was overlooked, a face in the crowd, a name on a list. But here, in this moment, she wasn't just a passing thought to him. She wasn't just someone waiting in the rain. "I didn't think you'd come," she admitted quietly, her voice trembling. I thought it was just another dream, another moment that would slip away." He turned his head to look at her then, his gaze intense, almost as if he was weighing her words. The soft lighting inside the car seemed to soften his features, the hardness of his usual demeanor giving way to something softer, more vulnerable. "I told you I would," he replied, his voice steady. "I keep my promises." Her heart fluttered at his words, but there was something in them, something she couldn't quite place. He kept his promises, yes, but what did that mean for her, for them? She was just a girl who had been waiting, standing in the rain, and he was everything. Power, wealth, the kind of life she had never imagined she could have. The tension between them shifted, like the space in the car was too small for both of them to exist in the way they were now. She was acutely aware of every little detail, his hand resting just a few inches from hers, the way his shirt clung to his frame. The air seemed charged with something unspoken, something that neither of them could deny. As the car turned onto a quieter street, he finally spoke again, his voice quieter now, more thoughtful. "I know this isn't easy for you. You've been waiting for someone, anyone, to give you the chance you deserve. But you need to know that this—" He paused, glancing at her, his expression hardening slightly. "This isn't some fairy tale, it's real. And when you're in my world, there are things that come with it, things you may not be prepared for." She swallowed, unsure of how to respond. Her heart beat faster in her chest, a mix of anticipation and fear. She didn't know what he meant, but the way he spoke made her nervous. She had never been part of a world like his, and the thought of stepping into it, of becoming something more than just the girl who waited alone in the rain. But she had already crossed that line. She was already in his world now. "Whether she was ready or not, I'm not afraid of what comes next," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I've waited for this, for a chance, for something real." He looked at her, a flicker of something in his eyes, something like admiration, mixed with the weight of understanding. He didn't say anything else, but the way he looked at her made her feel like she had already crossed into a new chapter of her life. The rain may have been pouring outside, but inside this limousine, something new was beginning, something real. The city outside the window blurred into nothing more than a collection of fading lights as the limousine made its way through the rain-soaked streets. The rhythmic sound of tires cutting through puddles created an almost hypnotic beat, filling the space between them with an unsettling calm. She stared out the window, her breath fogging up the glass as she watched the world slip by, unable to shake the feeling that this was all too surreal, too fast. Her heart was still racing, each beat a reminder of the shift in her life. She had gone from a solitary existence, waiting in the rain, to being whisked away by a man who lived a world she could hardly comprehend. His world, the world of luxury, of power, of untold wealth, seemed so far removed from her own. She had never felt more like an outsider than she did now, sitting in the back of his car, surrounded by the softness of leather, the hum of the engine, and the echo of her own thoughts. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, doubts, and fears. What was she doing here? Was she just another fleeting moment to him, another face he could forget once he had gotten what he wanted? Or was this the beginning of something real? Beside her, he sat in stillness, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, his profile illuminated by the soft light from the overhead lamps. His expression was unreadable, like a mask he wore with ease, concealing whatever emotions lay beneath. He hadn't spoken much since she had admitted her doubts, but she could feel the weight of his presence beside her. It was like he was waiting for something, waiting for her to make the next move, to take the next step. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the need to chase after answers. The uncertainty of the moment was all-consuming, was strangely comforting. For once, she wasn't expected to have everything figured out. She didn't need to prove anything. She could just be, but the silence between them, so heavy, so thick, was suffocating. She wanted to speak, to ask him questions, to understand who he really was. But she was afraid. Afraid that if she spoke, if she broke the silence, she might shatter the fragile connection they had built in such a short time. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke, his voice a low murmur that barely broke the silence. "You believe in fate?" The question caught her off guard, pulling her attention away from the world outside the window. She turned her head to look at him, her brow furrowed in confusion. Fate? Was that what this was? She had never given much thought to the idea of fate before. Life for her had always been about hard work, about making things happen for herself, no matter the odds. But now, sitting beside him in this car, with the rain pouring outside, it was hard to ignore the strange sense of destiny that seemed to hang in the air. "I don't know," she replied softly, her voice a whisper against the hum of the car. "I used to think it was just something people told themselves to make sense of things, to make sense of the chaos." He nodded, his gaze still fixed on the road, but she could see the slight clench of his jaw, the subtle tension in his posture, as if her answer had sparked something in him, something deeper than what she could understand. "I used to think that too," he said, his voice quieter now, as if the weight of his words was more than he cared to share. "But now, I don't. No. Sometimes it feels like we're all just following some kind of script, like we're being guided toward something, or someone." She glanced at him, her curiosity piqued, but she didn't speak. She wasn't sure if he was talking about her, about them, or if he was just lost in his own thoughts, his own reflections on the way his life had unfolded. There was a sadness in his voice, a vulnerability that she hadn't expected. The limousine turned a corner, and for a moment the soft glow of the streetlights outside bathed them in warmth, making the car feel less like a cage and more like a sanctuary from the world. She let herself sink into the moment, allowing the calm to wash over her, to ease the constant questions that swirled in her mind. She didn't have the answers, and maybe that was okay. Maybe this was the first time she didn't need them. The silence lingered for a while longer, but it wasn't as oppressive as it had been. The air between them had shifted like the space between two people who were finally starting to understand each other. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke again, his tone softer now, almost as if he was speaking to himself. "Maybe this is the beginning of something new, something we can't predict yet, something we have to trust, even if we don't fully understand it." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, but she didn't feel the need to respond. She didn't have the answers either, but she felt something that told her that whatever was happening between them was real, and that the answers, if they were meant to come, would come in time. For now, there was just the sound of the rain against the windows, the soft hum of the car, and the feeling of his presence beside her. And for the first time, she didn't feel alone. The limousine continued its quiet journey, cutting through the rain-drenched city, the world outside fading into a blur of lights and shadows. Inside, the car felt like its own universe, a cocoon where time seemed to move differently. She sat next to him, her thoughts still swirling from their earlier conversation, her heart pulsing with the strange, quiet connection that had begun to form between them. The uncertainty that had gnawed at her heart, the questions about his intentions, the fear that this moment was to fleeting none of that seemed to matter now. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite define. His presence was both a comfort and a mystery. He was so sure of himself, so confident in everything he did, and yet, in those rare moments when he spoke softly, when his guard seemed to drop for just a second, she glimpsed the man behind the facade, a man who, like her, had his own uncertainties, his own struggles, his own moments of doubt. She turned her head slightly, her gaze drifting back to him. He was looking out the window, his profile illuminated by the soft lights of the city, his face unreadable. She wondered what he was thinking. Was he just going through the motions? Or did he see something in her, too? Did he feel what she felt? The thought lingered in her mind, but she pushed it away. She didn't want to make assumptions. She had waited too long, hoped for too much, to let herself fall into illusions again. But this moment was different. She could feel it. In her bones, this wasn't just some fleeting connection. This wasn't just a chance encounter. There was something here, something real. She had to know more. Why did you come for me? The question left her lips before she could stop herself, her voice barely above a whisper. She immediately regretted it, her heart lurching in her chest as she waited for him to respond. Had she pushed too far? Was she asking too much? But he didn't seem surprised. He didn't recoil or pull away. Instead, he turned his head slowly, his gaze meeting hers with a quiet intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. His eyes, dark and thoughtful, searched her face for a moment, as if considering the weight of her question, the weight of her vulnerability. Because I saw you, he said, his voice low and steady. I saw you standing there in the rain, waiting, and I knew that you weren't like the rest. You didn't belong in that world, not the way they wanted you to. Waiting for someone who would see you for who you truly are. She felt a sharp pang in her chest at his words. They were too honest, too raw. It was as if he had reached inside her and pulled out everything she had buried, everything she had kept hidden. She didn't know how to respond, how to acknowledge the truth of his words without feeling exposed, without feeling like she was being laid bare for the first time. But why me? She asked, her voice trembling slightly despite herself. Why me, when you could have anyone? He let out a soft sigh, almost imperceptible, as if the weight of her question had unsettled him in ways he hadn't expected. He shifted in his seat, leaning slightly toward her, his expression softening. For a brief moment, the walls around him seemed to crumble, revealing something deeper, something more vulnerable. Because in all the years I've spent chasing power, money, success, I've realized that none of it means anything without someone to share it with. Someone who isn't just there because of what I can offer them, but someone who understands the truth of who I am. Someone who doesn't need me to be anything other than myself. His words hung in the air between them, heavy and full of meaning. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her breath catching in her throat. She had never expected this. Never expected him to say something so raw, so real. He wasn't just a man of power and privilege. He was someone searching for something. More just like her, the limo slowed as it approached a large, elegant building, its lights casting a soft glow on the wet streets. The car made a sharp turn and pulled into a private driveway, the tires crunching softly over the gravel. He didn't seem to notice the change in direction, his gaze still locked on her, his eyes intense, as if he was waiting for her to make sense of what he had said. She looked out the window briefly, the grand building before them coming into view. Her mind was still reeling from the words they had exchanged, from the raw honesty that had passed between them. Was this it? Was this the moment that everything changed for her, for them? She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know what was waiting beyond the doors of this mansion, beyond this night, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt something else, something warmer, something that made her believe in the possibility of a different life, a different path. The limousine came to a stop, and he turned to her, his expression unreadable once more, but the weight of their conversation still lingered between them. He reached out then, his hand resting gently on her arm, his touch warm against her cold skin. "Come inside," he said, his voice quieter now. "Let's see where this leads." And as the car doors opened, she took a deep breath, preparing to step into a new chapter. Whatever happened next, whatever the night would bring, she was no longer waiting alone in the rain. The night was cold, but the warmth that filled her chest was something new, something that seemed to burn away the doubts, the insecurities that had followed her for so long. The moment the car doors opened, the world beyond seemed to hold its breath. He stepped out first, his figure silhouetted against the soft lights of the mansion, his tall frame imposing yet graceful, as if he belonged to a world far removed from her own. But now, here she was, standing beside him, uncertain but resolute. The door to the mansion was wide open, welcoming them into the warmth of its grand interior. Soft golden lights illuminated the expansive foyer, and the sound of quiet music drifted from somewhere deep inside the house. The air smelled faintly of roses and something rich, like old wood and leather, a comforting contrast to the wet chill of the night. She stepped forward, her boots making a soft echo against the marble floors as she followed him into the heart of his world. It was beautiful, too beautiful. Almost the walls were lined with artwork she didn't recognize, the furniture immaculate, polished to perfection. The floors gleamed under the light, and the soft hum of a grand chandelier overhead added to the elegance of the space. She could feel herself shrinking under the weight of it all, the world of wealth and luxury stretching out before her like an alien landscape. He turned to her as they crossed the threshold, his gaze steady, unyielding, like he was daring her to step into this world, to claim a place in it, despite the overwhelming sense of unfamiliarity. He asked, his voice low and sincere. There was no arrogance in it, no expectation. He wasn't testing her. He was simply asking if she was ready. Ready for the life he could offer, ready to embrace everything that came with it. For a long moment, she hesitated, the fear creeping back into her heart. Was she ready? Was she truly prepared to walk into a world where everything was new, where everything would change, where nothing would ever be the same? The woman who had once stood alone in the rain, waiting for someone to notice her, would now be stepping into the unknown with a man who had the power to give her everything, or nothing at all. But something had shifted in her. Something had changed the moment they had shared in the back of the limousine, in the quiet of the car. He wasn't just the billionaire. He was someone who had seen her, truly seen her, in a way that no one had before. He had acknowledged her struggle, her pain, her loneliness, and he had pulled her out of it. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening, and looked him squarely in the eye. "I'm ready," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips, and for the first time, she saw it not the polished, guarded smile he wore in public, but something softer, something more genuine. "Good," he said simply, his eyes softening. He reached out and took her hand, guiding her further into the mansion, where the world was unfamiliar, but the possibility of something more was closer than she had ever dared to imagine. As they walked through the grand halls, the silence between them was no longer heavy with uncertainty. It was comfortable, the kind of silence that only comes when two people understand each other without the need for words. The warmth of the mansion, the soft music, the quiet comfort it, all seemed to fade into the background as they walked side by side, as if everything was finally falling into place. They reached the large living room, where a fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the space. The furniture was arranged perfectly, inviting yet somehow not as intimidating as it had seemed moments before. There were no pretensions here, only the soft glow of firelight, the flickering shadows, and the promise of a new beginning. He let go of her hand then, stepping back slightly, giving her space to take in the room. She stood there for a moment, absorbing it all, and then she turned to him, her gaze steady. "You don't have to be anything but yourself here," he said, his voice reassuring, warm. "I don't need you to change. I just need you to be you." Her heart fluttered at his words, a mixture of relief and something deeper, something more powerful welling up inside her. She had spent so long pretending, so long trying to fit into a world that never understood her, never saw her. But here, with him, it was different. He saw her, and for the first time she wasn't afraid to step into the unknown. She wasn't afraid to take the chance. "I'll be myself," she said softly, stepping closer to him. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." He smiled again, the kind of smile that reached his eyes this time, and she felt her heart swell with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, hope. In that moment, in the warmth of the firelight, with the world outside still hidden in the rain, everything changed. The past, the waiting, the loneliness, the fear faded into the background. And before her stood a future, uncertain but full of possibility. A future that she could step into, one where she was no longer waiting alone in the rain. And with that, they stepped forward, together, into the unknown.